The hospital corridor smelled of disinfectant and despair. Preston Walker sat there, grease still under his fingernails from the morning shift at the garage, holding his feverish daughter close. Through the half-open door, he caught fragments of a conversation that made his hands go cold. A CEO's voice, brittle with exhaustion. A team of doctors delivering a verdict. Paralyzed, permanent, no hope. Then he saw her, 18 years old, staring at the ceiling with the same emptiness he'd seen once before, in eyes he couldn't save. The girl's mother was begging for anything, any chance. The doctors shook their heads. Something inside Preston, something he'd buried 3 years ago, clawed its way back to the surface. He stood, walked through that door, every eye turned to this stranger in oil-stained clothes. And he said the words that would change everything. "Let me help her." But the hands offering hope were covered in grease, not surgical gloves, and nobody in that room knew why. 3 years had passed since Preston Walker walked out of St. Margaret's Hospital for the last time. He had been the best neurosurgeon on the East Coast, the man other doctors called when hope ran out. But when his wife's brain tumor proved inoperable, all his skill had meant nothing. He watched her die while his hands, those hands that had saved countless lives, could only hold hers. So he left medicine, found work at Jimmy's Auto Repair, became just a father to 7-year-old Haley. The smell of motor oil was easier to wash off than the memory of failure. But children get sick, and sick children need hospitals. Haley had spiked a fever that morning, and now Preston sat in the corridor he'd sworn never to return to, waiting while nurses drew her blood. That was when he heard the voices through the partially open door. Dr. Reeves was speaking in that careful tone Preston knew too well. The patient was 18 years old, car accident 4 months ago, complete spinal cord injury at T6, no motor function below the waist, no sensation, no hope of recovery. 3 specialists had reviewed the case. The prognosis was unanimous. Preston moved closer to the door. Through the gap, he saw a woman in a tailored suit, exhaustion carved into her face, and in the bed, a girl barely older than a child, staring at the ceiling with eyes that had given up. Those eyes hit him like a physical blow. He had seen that look before, in his wife's face during those final weeks. The mother was begging for anything, any chance. Dr. Reeves shook his head professionally. "Mrs. Brooks, we need to focus on quality of life now. The sooner we accept reality, the sooner we can make Vivian comfortable." Something inside Preston shifted. He looked at his hands, scarred from working with tools instead of scalpels, and remembered what they used to do. He thought about the experimental techniques he'd been developing for his wife, the theories that died with her because he'd been too broken to continue. The girl was 18. His wife had been 32. And suddenly, 3 years of running away felt like cowardice instead of grief. Preston stood, his mechanic's boots loud on linoleum, and pushed the door open. 5 pairs of eyes turned to him. "Let me help her." The room went silent. Dr. Reeves looked annoyed. Mrs. Brooks confused. But Preston's eyes were on Vivian. She turned her head, and he saw a flicker beneath the emptiness. Preston studied her with the trained eye he'd buried for 3 years. Her muscle tone, the asymmetry in her shoulders, the shallow breathing. 6 complete, 4 months post-injury, he said quietly. But the imaging would show some cord preservation, wouldn't it? Not complete transection, just severe compression and inflammation. The pathway isn't dead. It's sleeping. The room went still. Dr. Reeves stared. A gray-haired specialist stood abruptly. "Who are you?" Preston felt Haley stir against him, heard her small voice say, "Daddy?" For a moment he almost walked away, but then he looked at Mrs. Brooks, at the desperate hope in her eyes, and at Vivian, whose hands had tightened on the sheets. "My name is Preston Walker," he said, "and 3 years ago, I was the best neurosurgeon you could have called for this case. The revelation hung in the air. Dr. Reeves went pale. The gray-haired woman grabbed her phone. "Preston Walker," she said slowly. "The neurosurgeon who pioneered the micro-decompression technique. You published 17 papers on neuroplasticity. You were nominated for the Horowitz Prize." She looked at his clothes, the child in his arms, the grease under his nails. "And then you stopped." Preston met her eyes. "And then I stopped." Mrs. Brooks found her voice. "You can help her? You can help my daughter?" Preston looked at Vivian. She was watching him, waiting for him to lie like everyone else. "I don't know," he said honestly. "But I know what they're telling you isn't the whole truth. The spinal cord is more resilient than most doctors believe. Given the right treatment, there's a chance. Maybe small, but it exists." Haley coughed, reminding him why he was here. Mrs. Brooks moved toward him. "Please," she whispered. "If there's any chance at all, I'm begging you. I'll pay anything. Just please, don't walk away." Preston looked at his daughter, then at Vivian. "I need to take care of her first. When she's stabilized, we can talk. I'm not promising anything. I've been out of practice for 3 years. But if you're willing to take that risk, if Vivian is willing, maybe we can find out what's possible." Vivian's voice was sharp with anger. "Why should I trust you? You're a quitter, a doctor who walked away. You couldn't keep your own life together, and now you want to experiment on me?" Preston didn't flinch. "You're right. I did walk away when it mattered most. Maybe that makes me the worst person to offer you hope. But it also means I know what giving up costs. So if I'm standing here offering to try, it's because I think you're worth the attempt." He turned toward the door. "I'll be back in 2 hours. The choice is yours, not your mother's, not the doctor's. Yours." 2 hours later, with Haley's bacterial infection diagnosed and antibiotics prescribed, Preston stood outside Vivian's room. He'd accessed her files, reviewed her scans. The imaging told him what he needed to know: severe compression, massive inflammation, but pathways that might wake up with the right approach. He knocked and entered. Mrs. Brooks had been crying. Vivian's jaw was set. Preston sat at eye level with the girl. "Tell me what you're angry about right now." "In this moment." "I'm angry that you're making me hope, when hope is the most painful thing I've felt in 4 months, Vivian said. Preston nodded. "That's good, because this is going to be more painful than you imagine. Hours of exercises that feel pointless, medications that make you sick, treatments that hurt, all for changes so small you might not notice them. And there's a real chance that after months, you'll still be exactly where you are now. But there's also a chance we wake up something everyone thinks is dead. I can't promise you'll walk. I can't promise you'll notice a difference. But I promise I won't quit." The room was silent. Finally, Vivian spoke. "If I do this, I'm in control. This is my body, and I decide when we stop." Preston smiled. "Deal. But that means you take responsibility for the work, too. You show up. You push through. And you trust me when something doesn't make sense." Mrs. Brooks straightened. "What do you need from me?" Preston was serious. "Money, equipment, and trust when other doctors tell you I'm wrong, because they will." The logistics took a week. Preston negotiated space, acquired equipment, set up protocols. Haley watched with 7-year-old wisdom, understanding something had changed. On the night before Vivian's first session, she asked, "Are you going to be a doctor again?" Preston smoothed her hair. "I'm going to try to help someone, but you're still the most important thing. Always." Vivian's first session was a disaster. She spent 20 minutes telling Preston what she thought of him and his chances. Preston let her rage, taking notes calmly. When she finished, he stood. "Are you done?" "Because we're burning daylight." That became their pattern. Vivian fighting with words, Preston pushing forward with determination. The treatments were grueling, 3-hour assessments mapping what was gone and what might be salvageable. Passive range of motion exercises, electrical stimulation, positioning techniques. Vivian endured it with gritted teeth, exhausted by the end of each session. But working with Vivian meant less time at the garage, less money. Haley's medical bills piled up. Preston took loans with brutal interest rates, juggled payment plans, stopped eating lunch to save money. He dropped to 4 hours of sleep. Vivian's sessions, garage shifts, evening research. Haley adapted, never complaining when he was too exhausted to function. And through it all, Vivian remained unchanged. 6 weeks in, nothing had improved. Not a flicker of movement, not a whisper of sensation. Vivian's hostility evolved into weary resignation. Mrs. Brooks asked pointed questions about timelines. Then Dr. Reeves pulled Preston aside. "You need to stop this. You're giving false hope. This crusade is cruel. Let her go." That night, with Haley coughing from a cold she couldn't shake, Preston sat in his apartment and considered quitting. The responsible thing would be to walk away, let Vivian move on. He stared at a bottle of whiskey when Haley appeared, wrapped in a blanket. "Daddy, are you okay?" He opened his arms, let her climb into his lap. "I'm thinking about giving up on something I thought I could do but maybe can't." Haley was quiet. Then she said, "You gave up on being a doctor because you couldn't save Mommy. But Mommy's gone, Daddy, and that girl is still here. Maybe you couldn't help Mommy, but you could help her. Isn't that why you became a doctor?" The simple logic broke something open in Preston's chest. "When did you get so wise?" She shrugged. "I've been listening. I think Mommy would want you to try. She told me you had magic hands. Maybe you just forgot." The next morning, Preston showed up with renewed determination. Vivian narrowed her eyes. "What? Did you get a pep talk?" Preston met her gaze. "My daughter reminded me why I became a doctor. Not for success, but because when someone is suffering and I have skills to help, walking away is worse than trying and failing. So yes, I'm trying harder. And you can fight me, or fight with me, but we're not stopping." Something in Vivian shifted. What if every possibility ends in failure? For the first time, her voice held vulnerability instead of anger. "Then we'll have failed trying," Preston said, "and that's better than failing by giving up." He began setting up equipment. "Today we're trying something different. I've been treating this as a structural problem. But your brain still sends signals down, even if they're not getting through. So we're going to create new pathways around the blockage. It's going to be uncomfortable, and it might not work. But I need you to trust me." Vivian looked at him, then nodded. "Okay, let's do it." The new protocol was brutal. Functional electrical stimulation combined with intensive visualization. Vivian concentrating on moving muscles, while electrical impulses forced contractions. The theory was that pairing mental intention with physical sensation might form new neural connections. The first session left Vivian crying from frustration. Preston documented everything and came back the next day. And again. For 3 more weeks, they pushed forward with no visible results. Then one night, Preston was adjusting electrodes on her right quadriceps when he felt it. The smallest flutter under his fingertips, arriving before the electrical stimulation. He froze. "Do that again. Just think about making that muscle move, right now." Vivian's face scrunched in concentration. There it was, a tiny contraction, maybe 5% of normal strength, but happening on its own. Voluntary, controlled, impossible. "You just moved," he said, his voice hoarse. "Voluntarily. Your brain sent a signal, and your muscle received it." Vivian's face cycled through disbelief, hope, fear, denial. "That's impossible." "Everyone said..." Preston was laughing, relief and vindication pouring out. Apparently, everyone was wrong. Do it again. They spent the next hour testing, confirming. The movement was inconsistent, but real. Preston called Carolyn Brooks at 3 in the morning. Your daughter just moved her leg. It's the smallest movement you've ever seen, but it's voluntary. We have a chance now. A real one. Word spread through the hospital. Doctors who declared her hopeless suddenly wanted to be involved, but attention brought scrutiny and criticism. Several doctors questioned his methodology, implied he was exploiting a vulnerable family. The ethics board requested a meeting. Through it all, Preston focused on Vivian, trusting results more than rhetoric. 2 weeks later, Vivian could consistently contract her right quadriceps, generating maybe 15% of normal strength. Preston filmed every session, building documentation. Slowly, Vivian began to believe. The hostile anger cracked, revealing a scared girl who desperately wanted this to be real. She pushed herself harder, her face set in determination. But progress came with a price. The increased schedule meant Preston was splitting time between early morning sessions, afternoon garage shifts, and evening sessions. 3 hours of sleep, living on coffee and adrenaline. His hands developed tremors from exhaustion. Haley's cold developed into something worse. The loans were coming due, interest compounding faster than he could pay. Then Haley collapsed at school. Preston left mid-session, terror racing through him. The diagnosis was pneumonia, bacterial, serious but treatable. But Haley needed hospitalization for IV antibiotics. Preston did the mental math. Even with insurance, he was looking at bills that would bankrupt him. He sat beside her bed that night, watching her labored breathing, feeling the universe demand he choose. Haley needed him more than Vivian did. The responsible choice was obvious. That was when Vivian appeared in her wheelchair. I heard about your daughter, she said quietly, maneuvering into the room. She's beautiful. How old? Preston's voice was rough. 7. And she's been through too much, because I've been selfish, chasing something that probably can't be caught. Vivian was quiet, watching Haley sleep. I've been a bitch to you from day one. I've fought you, doubted you, made everything hard, and you kept showing up, not because it was easy or profitable, but because you thought I was worth the effort. No one else has ever done that. Just you. Preston felt stripped bare. I have to take care of her. She's my responsibility. I've been failing her by focusing on you. Vivian shook her head. You've been teaching her what it means to care about people, to not give up when things get hard. That's being exactly the father she needs. She fumbled with a bag. Can you grab the folder? Inside were financial statements, a check for an amount that made his breath catch. My mother knows you're drowning. This is for your compensation, but let's be honest. You've been doing this for free because you're an idiot with a hero complex. Use it for your daughter. Get her the best care. Pay your debts. And keep working with me, because we've started something that deserves to be finished. Your daughter needs you, but I need you too. And maybe there's enough of you to go around. Preston stared at the check, tears spilling over. I can't take this. Vivian reached out, touching his hand with fingers that could barely move but were voluntarily moving. Yes, you can. Because if you quit now, we both lose. And I'm done losing. So take the check, fix your daughter, and tomorrow we get back to work. Deal? Deal, he said, his voice breaking. For the first time since his wife died, Preston believed maybe he could be both father and doctor. Maybe broken pieces could be assembled into something whole again. Vivian sat with him through the night, neither speaking, but both understanding something fundamental had shifted. Trust, respect, recognition that they were fighting impossible odds, and having an ally made the fight less lonely. Haley's fever broke 2 days later. The antibiotics worked. Carolyn Brooks handled the medical bills, and for the first time in months, Preston could breathe without financial panic. When Haley was discharged, demanding pancakes, Preston carried her home feeling lighter than he had in years. The break from therapy had consequences. Vivian had regressed slightly, but she greeted the news with calm determination. Then we work harder. I've spent 4 months feeling sorry for myself. I can spend a few more months fighting. At least fighting feels like living. That attitude became the foundation of her recovery. She drove the process now, pushing herself beyond what Preston asked, demanding longer sessions, refusing plateaus. The next 8 weeks brought incremental progress. Voluntary movement spread from her right quadriceps to other muscle groups. Her left leg woke slower, requiring different techniques. Sensation began returning in patches, strange and overwhelming. They celebrated tiny victories, wiggling toes, feeling pain, generating strength to press her foot against his hand. But the biggest challenge was mental. Months of being told she'd never recover had created hopelessness, as real as the damaged spine. On dark days, she raged at Preston. He took the anger without flinching, showing up the next day ready to try again. Haley became part of the process. Preston brought her when childcare fell through. She'd sit doing homework, occasionally cheering when Vivian managed something new. The two girls developed friendship, Vivian drawn to the 7-year-old's honesty. Haley recognizing that Vivian needed someone who saw her as whole, not broken. 3.5 months after that first flicker, Vivian stood for the first time. In the parallel bars, hands gripping rails, Preston's hands supporting her waist. "You're going to bear weight now," he said calmly. He slowly reduced support, watching her legs tremble. She managed 10 seconds before her strength gave out, and he caught her. Those 10 seconds brought tears to her eyes and cracked Preston's composure. They built from there. Word of Vivian's recovery spread. Medical journals requested interviews. Families called desperate. Preston turned down most, focused on Vivian. The hospital offered him a position heading a rehabilitation research program. Preston sought Vivian's input. "Take it," she said. "You saved me. Now save others. That's how you honor what we've done together." The day Vivian took her first steps, half the hospital crowded into the therapy room. Carolyn Brooks was there, phone off, attention solely on her daughter. Doctors watched with amazement. Nurses cried. Haley sat in front, bouncing with excitement. Preston stood at the parallel bars, hands hovering near Vivian's waist. "You've got this. I've been reducing support for weeks. Now just move forward. One step." Vivian's face was set in fierce concentration, body trembling. She shifted weight onto her right leg, then slowly lifted her left foot, moved it forward 6 inches, set it down, tested it, found it stable, then moved the right foot. It wasn't graceful. It hurt, but it was walking. After 4 months of being told she never would, after 8 months of therapy, after countless hours of refusal to quit, Vivian Brooks took 3 steps before her legs gave out, and Preston caught her. The room erupted, but Preston looked at Haley first, at his daughter's face glowing with pride, understanding that her father was doing something important. "You did it, Daddy," she mouthed, and Preston felt the last pieces of his shattered life clicking into place. He hadn't saved his wife, but he'd saved Vivian, and in doing so, saved himself, taught his daughter that trying mattered, proven that broken things could be repaired. Vivian progressed from 3 steps to 10 to walking the parallel bars. Preston accepted the hospital position. Carolyn Brooks transformed, spending less time at headquarters, more at home. The ethics board that questioned his methods now wanted them as standard practice. But Preston kept priorities clear. Haley first, patients second, everything else last. 4 months after Vivian's first steps, Preston stood at the cemetery where his wife was buried. Haley held his hand. Vivian stood with a cane. Preston spoke to the headstone. "I couldn't save you. I tried everything, and it wasn't enough. I've been running from that failure. But I think you'd forgive me. And maybe you'd be proud that I stopped running, that I found a way to turn the worst thing that happened to me into something that could help someone else." Vivian spoke quietly. "She gave you the skills that saved me, the knowledge, the empathy from loss. Without her, you wouldn't have known how to fight for me. So maybe she did save me, just differently than anyone expected." Standing between the two most important young women in his life, Preston chose to believe it. He wasn't dishonoring his wife's memory. He was honoring it by using what she taught him about love, loss, the importance of trying even when success seems impossible. As they walked back, Vivian moving slowly but steadily, Preston felt something shift. Not grief lifting completely, that would always be there, but the suffocating guilt loosening its grip. He'd spent 3 years believing walking away from medicine was the only way to survive failure. But he'd been wrong. The answer wasn't to stop caring, stop trying, stop using his gifts. It was to accept that he couldn't save everyone, that sometimes best efforts still ended in loss, but that didn't make the effort worthless. 1 year after Preston stepped into Vivian's room and offered to help, they held a demonstration for medical professionals. The auditorium was packed. Preston explained his methods, showed videos of progression, acknowledged gaps in understanding. Then he invited Vivian to the stage. She walked out without assistance, without the cane, moving with careful precision. The audience gasped, then applauded, but Vivian waved them quiet. "I'm not here to be your miracle story. I'm here to tell you that every patient you've written off as hopeless deserves a doctor who fights for them the way Dr. Walker fought for me. He didn't have better equipment or secret knowledge. He just refused to give up. And he taught me to refuse to give up. And that made all the difference." She looked at Preston. "He was a great neurosurgeon who became a broken man, who became a mechanic, who became my savior. The lesson isn't that I can walk. The lesson is that second chances exist, that people can change, that the worst thing that happened to you can become the foundation for the best thing you do with your life. So don't just study his techniques. Study his willingness to try when trying seemed pointless, because that's what saved me. Not his skill, but his heart." Preston's attention was on the back, where Haley sat grinning, proud. He'd started this trying to help one girl walk, but he'd done something more important, shown his daughter what it meant to not give up, to try even when odds were against you, to believe broken things could be healed. The months that followed brought challenges. Preston took on new patients. Not all progressed like Vivian. Some recovered partial function and plateaued. Those failures were hard, reopening old wounds. But he learned to carry failures differently. Not as personal defeats, but as reminders that medicine was art as much as science. Vivian continued recovering, eventually living independently, enrolling in college to become a physical therapist. She and Preston maintained a close relationship, no longer doctor and patient, but family. She spent holidays with Preston and Haley, becoming the big sister his daughter never had. Carolyn Brooks restructured her priorities, stepping back from operations to focus on philanthropic work. Haley grew up absorbing lessons about resilience and compassion. She excelled in school and announced at 12 that she wanted to be a doctor, maybe emergency medicine, because someone needs to take care of you, Dad, and you're terrible at work-life balance. Preston laughed, grateful his daughter's childhood had given her strength and understanding of what truly mattered. Preston went to bed that night, feeling peace he hadn't known in years. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, patients struggling, treatments not working, the frustration of fighting limitations. But he'd learned that challenges were the point, that work was sacred not despite its difficulty, but because of it. He'd been given a second chance, used it to become someone his daughter could be proud of, someone his wife would recognize, someone he could respect. In the darkness, Preston thought about that moment when he stepped through a door and said, "Let me help her." Those words had become a philosophy, a commitment extending far beyond one patient. Let me help. Not, I will fix this, or I promise success. Just, let me try. Let me bring my skills and hope to your problem. Let me refuse to accept that impossible is permanent. Let me care enough to persist when persistence seems pointless. And in the end, that had been enough. Not always, not for everyone, but enough to matter, enough to transform his life from tragedy to purpose. Preston Walker had been the best neurosurgeon, then a broken mechanic, then a doctor again. Through all transformations, one thing remained: his capacity to care about strangers, to see suffering and want to alleviate it, to believe trying mattered even when outcomes were uncertain. As sleep claimed him, Preston's last thought was gratitude, genuine appreciation for the unlikely journey his life had taken, for the people who'd intersected with his path, for the second chance that arrived disguised as a single father with a sick child in a hospital corridor. He'd been broken, and that breaking had been necessary, clearing away arrogance, leaving behind humility, empathy, and understanding that healing was always collaboration between healer and healed. The story would continue to be told in medical schools, used as an example of what was possible when conventional wisdom was questioned and persistence replaced resignation. But for Preston, the story was simpler. It was about a man who'd lost everything, including himself, and found redemption and purpose in the most unexpected place. It was about learning that failure wasn't final, that second chances existed for those brave enough to try again, that broken pieces could be reassembled into something beautiful even if it looked different than planned. And in the end, that was enough.